Okay, so another one of my plum rambles. This one I'm going to title is Wokeism a Religion. And you know what? This is the second time I've tried to record this. And the first time I spent so long discussing why I used the word wokeism. I thought, what a ridiculous introduction, even though it's a ramble. What a ridiculous introduction. So I want to discuss why I'm using the word wokeism in this video. It's not a word that I've ever used before, but I'll discuss that at the end of the video. For now, all you need to know is, like a lot of these rambles, this is a response to comments that I received on an earlier video. The earlier video was from a few days ago on the UK Census 2021, the religion question. It's a video that I'm really happy with. I think it's a good video, loads of information, a bit more sober, a bit more structured than that, a lot more structured than this. And it discusses the decline in religiosity in the United Kingdom, particularly over the last 10 years between the latest census and the previous census. And I got some responses there. And two of them couched it in terms of wokeism. And one of them, they asked, well, is wokeism just a new religion that's replacing some of these old traditional religions? Society is replacing one religion with another, so is wokeism a religion? And the other is to say, well, are people themselves just replacing their religion? Okay, so the people who were religious are now just wokeist. So those are the two things I want to talk about. So I want to discuss them, and then at the end, I just want to discuss language and terms like wokeism and the way that we remove meaning from terms which otherwise might be of use. So first, let me say that I don't think it's particularly helpful to describe wokeism as a religion. I think one of the ways is going to feature in when I start discussing other terms like SJW and gaslighting at the end of the video, which is what I'm going to talk about then, which is that we suck meaning out of words. We have a fair idea what religion means. It doesn't necessarily traditionally involve a god. There are forms of Buddhism, etc., Taoism, that don't involve gods. We know that, but we still regard them as religions. But I think it's just pushing the envelope a little bit more when we take quite modern, poorly established social justice or sociopolitical movements and bodies and start saying, well, they're religions. Because why are we doing that? Are we doing that as a form of sensible categorization? We're not, are we? Let's be honest, we're doing it to try and smear. It's the same as when religious people say, well, atheism's just another religion. They don't mean that. It's a meaningless thing to say. After all, theism isn't a religion, so why would atheism be a religion? But they're doing it to try and smear. And I think all you do is you just detract some meaning from the word religion. But nevertheless, as I've said in the past, that doesn't mean that some of these things don't exhibit the same qualities that we associate with religions. The same, in my view, flaws that we associate with religion. And I think my biggest bugbear with what you would describe as wokeism, what we're going to describe as wokeism in this video, pardon me, is that effectively it goes down the same stifling path that religions traditionally go down in terms of making certain discussions out of reach, right? That there's the sort of the orthodox position that you're allowed to have, and then there are these heterodox views that you're really not supposed to espouse. It's not a discussion that you're supposed to have. There's a kind of blasphemy element. And there's kind of a set of points that you're supposed to take at face value, and that's the end of it. The discussion is finished, apparently. And there's always a reason, isn't there? The reasons are slightly different, typically, in traditional religions. There's the threat that you might go to hell or something, but there's also simply the threat that you might offend people. If you make a picture of Muhammad, you're going to offend Muslims, and that's why you mustn't make a picture of Muhammad. If you say certain things about Christianity, you're going to offend Christians. It's going to cause harm to them, and so you shouldn't do it. And this is the same thing here. I have lost track of the number of times that I've heard that this the biggest battleground on this is the trans issue, isn't it? It's questions around trans people and how we're going to integrate and where we give ground and where we do regard trans women as women and other things where maybe biological sex is more important and we need to take account of that, how we record things on documents. These are really complicated questions, I think, in my view. But it's kind of the hardest battleground here, where the claim is that even to discuss some of these things is going to damage some people. Ergo, we shouldn't be having those discussions at all. And that, to me, it does start to get into really religious grounds there, that you're pushing these things off the table. And you could certainly make the same claim traditionally with religion, couldn't you? This is the odd thing, is that if you went back a few hundred years, most societies in Western Europe, or in Eastern Europe, for example, were Christian, but they were heavily one church, Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, or Protestant. You could certainly, I think, legitimately make the claim that in any particular society, if you had a very, very heavily Catholic society, that espousing heterodox Protestant beliefs was damaging to society, right? Because it's creating division. It led to civil wars, these things. So you would have every right in saying, you would be quite right in saying that by espousing those views at odds with Catholicism, or in another country at odds with Protestantism or Eastern Orthodox Christianity, that was causing damage both to society and to individuals. But where in our brains would we fashion like the logic that means that people shouldn't have been able to espouse those views, that those countries just had to be set in stone then for all of time, because to do anything different would cause a period of damage and upset and trauma for some people involved? That's a kind of bizarre thing to say, isn't it? You could never achieve anything unless you believe that Catholicism is factually true or Protestantism is factually true. That precludes you from ever moving out of those mindsets. And yet that's what we're being told here, that there's effectively unchallengeable truths and that it's causing offence or damage or people are going to be harmed. Yes, it's okay to talk about things, but if it means that a trans person somewhere could be assaulted by having that conversation, then that conversation can't be had. It's kind of a manipulative thing to put on people, in my view. That, well, yes, you might have a legitimate point. Why would it matter whether you've got a legitimate point or not? How can we explore that? Because you've pushed it off the table. This seems to me the exact trick that religious people have done for a long time. And it's interesting because a lot of people have said that sort of, well, actually, a lot of the sort of YouTube skeptic atheist people have gone down that line. And it is true. There are people that I see. There's one, I don't even want to mention their name, but they traditionally made lots and lots of videos about religion and now make lots and lots of videos about gender-related issues. And they are now very adamant that certain discussions must be off the table. You're a Nazi if you were to mention any of these things because they cause damage. Right, you can't have discussions that could cause damage to a group of people. And yet they never had those concerns. For all those years that they were making discussions about religion, they never felt any concern over that, right? Whether that could cause damage to people, because they felt, well, what I want to say I think is true, and so I should have every right to say it. And they would argue, I have every damn right to say what I want, is the kind of way that they would say it. It's beyond reason to stop me saying what I want. And now they would take the exact opposite stance, just because seemingly it suits their ends. So my view would be in response to that I don't think it's not a case of is wokeism a religion or isn't it? It's more a case of is it helpful to describe things in that way? because that's what we're talking about. Words are fluid. We can apply them however we want, really, can't we, with these things? And so what we've got to say is there utility in that? And I don't think there is. I don't think it's helpful. I think it just smears two types of things that are very, very different. Being a Buddhist or a Muslim is very, very different to being really, really hardline on social justice issues. But I do think there are some similarities between the hardliners in each case. Absolutely, I do. And the most worrying one for me is this business of, like I say, trying to push conversations off. Everything else I can deal with. Everything else I can deal with, because we still have this thing. It's discredited, isn't it? This free marketplace of ideas, because it was oversold. That's why it's discredited. It was sold. I remember a Thunderfoot video from years back where Thunderfoot sort of this idea of the cream rising to the top, and places like YouTube, it's the free market of ideas, and and the best idea will always win out.
Thankfully, these PC bullies really cannot get much purchase on the open forum of free speech. That is, on YouTube, these thin-skinned whiners are an utter non-event. This is why people like me have always argued for the open marketplace of ideas and a robust and level playing field. Because if you can't convince anyone in an arena like that, then there's a good chance that you're talking crap.
And that's just rubbish. I said at the time that it was rubbish. In a video response to that, and I think Thunderfoot eventually got his fingers burnt. When Sargon of Akkad was sort of really on a roll, he had a discussion with him, and he got on the wrong side of that. Not because he had the worst ideas, but because Sargon had the most vociferous and larger audience at the time, and that's really what the things that Thunderfoot had always put down to his ideas being better were also down to the fact that he had a big audience than the people that he was dealing with, frankly, a lot of the time. And he wasn't really, I don't know, but it went so badly for him that he just said, you know what, I'm leaving all that crap behind. I'm going to go back and concentrate on the more scientific things. But that being said, I do think the free marketplace for ideas it's kind of like the way that Churchill described democracy, that it's the what does he say, something like it's the worst system other than all the other ones that we've tried. You know, I'm probably bastardized what he said there, but he's right. It's not perfect. What he's saying is it's not perfect, but it seems to be better than all the other alternatives. And the free marketplace for ideas, by which I mean this idea that I say what I think and you say what you think, and we just keep hitting and arguing and debating, and everybody else can listen in and they can chime in. It's not perfect. Some people have bigger voices, they have bigger platforms, they have better means of getting their arguments across. Of course they do. But it's the best that we've got. The alternative to that is suppressing things. Those are really the only two alternatives. You allow everybody to talk, or you don't allow everybody to talk. And I think allowing everybody to talk is not perfect, but it's better than not, is what I would say. So that's really my issue with it, and that's the aspect, the religious aspect of it, that I don't like, I think. And you see it all the time, by the way. You see it all the time. There's a term that some of them use within those communities called woke scolds to apply. It's the people who have some of those positions. They agree with the beliefs, but they're very much open to debate. I applaud them for that, by the way. And they use this term to refer to their bedfellows in terms of beliefs a lot of the time, who not only don't want to engage, but constantly criticize and harp and decry them for engaging, right? Because in their view, in the views of these really hardline people, you don't engage. You don't argue with people, you just block them, you just cut them out. And it's just, that's everything that's wrong, in my view. The other argument was whether people are replacing God belief and religion with wokeism, and I thought that's really interesting. I'm going to say yes and no. Statistically, I think no. I think it's very easy to look online at a few people, a few thousand people, and see that as corresponding to everybody. But most people, you're talking about in the UK with the decline of religion, millions of people, not a few hardline nutcases online, right? That's not what you're talking about. And you can't judge it on that. And if you look at the stats, even within the UK, I live in the part of the UK that has low levels of religiosity, high levels of irreligiosity. If you go into London, that is the part of the UK that has the highest level of religiosity in terms of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, blam, 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 right? These organised religions, they have the highest levels of religiosity, the lowest levels of irreligiosity, and yet they have the highest levels. If you want to find all these hardline progressives, these wokeists, that's where you're going to find them. You're not going to find them in the backwaters of Lincoln, Louth, Grimsby, Scunthorpe, places like that. You're going to find them in the places like London. So that goes against it, doesn't it? If it's simply a fact of you lose your organised religion, then you gain one of these new progressive religions, then the places that I live ought to be the ultra-progressive parts of the world. But they're not. It's the big urban areas that often have the greatest levels of religiosity, that also have the greatest levels of these modern hardline social progressives. So that doesn't fit with it. I also think that what is true on the other end of the scale is that we have to be aware that there are people that leave religion that still have a religious mindset. And it's baffling what they do, you know. I'm thinking of people like, if you remember, Dave Cullen, Computing Forever. Fake Sagan back in the day. He's an Eastern Orthodox now. Dave Cullen's a champion. He's a pro-theist. He's become a somewhat boring champion of religion, in my view. Brett Keane was the original. I mean, Brett Keane predates me. His time was kind of over when I started back in 2008. He was like 2006, 2007, one of the original YouTube atheists, right? And one of the real hardliners, making all these videos against Christianity. For several years now, he has been making not particularly popular, but videos championing Christianity. This is what you see. You see these people that leave their religion. They become like Paul in the Bible, Paul of Tarsus, who is, of course, Jewish. But then he becomes a Christian. And he goes from being a sort of Jewish zealot to being a Christian zealot. The only thing that changes, the zealotry remains. The zealotry remains, but the religion changes. And this is what happens. You have these people that were probably very religious, and then they lose their religion, and they've got the same attitude there, but they're only ever that far away from going back again, because they still have the same need, the same sort of religious mentality. They've been brought up that way. I don't think they're born that way. I think some people are born more predisposed towards religious thinking than others. I do. But I think that it's also it's an upbringing. And once you've been brought up like that, you're kind of poisoned. Your brain's poisoned forever. In some cases, you're never going to be able to become. People talk about having a God-sized. If you lose God, you've got a God-sized hole that needs filling, and I think that's true. But it's a bit like having cancer. If you have a big tumour growing in your body and it's cut out, you've got a big tumour-sized hole. Doesn't mean the rest of us have, right? It's only if you've got the cancer to begin with. And I'm not trying to insinuate that religion is like having a cancer growing in your body. But in this aspect, there's the same. Yeah, there probably is a religion-sized hole if you've been brought up in a religion and you try and fill it and you look for something else. But it doesn't mean the rest of us that are brought up irreligious to begin with have that same hole. Now, it might be true. Bear this in mind, of course. If I give you 1,000 people who were brought up in a hardline Christian upbringing and are hardline Christians, and 1,000 people who were brought up in a very irreligious, non-religious upbringing, okay, and aren't religious. You compare those 2,000 people. Which one of them are most likely to go into these hardline wokeist social justice things? Well, it's going to be the non-religious, I would say, simply because the religious have pre-commitments that preclude them accepting some of those things, right? Even if they wanted to, well, God says no, so it's no. So yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a bias there, but that's a different thing. That's not saying that you're definitely going to replace one religion with another. What it's saying is that if you don't have that religion to begin with, then at least all the options are open to you, so you could go down that path. And honestly, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Let me just give you the example of three people that all of these things, they've said things recently, and that they are all people, and I'm not giving you these people to promote their position. That's not relevant here, or to promote them. But just think about what these people believe. Like I say, the biggest battleground on this, the most hardline battleground, where things have maybe got that we've had things about sexism and feminism and all these kinds of things, and issues relating to women versus men in terms of these things. We've had race, of course, as an issue, immigration, all these different things, but none of them I don't think has been as hardline as the gender/transgender debates. That's the one where really people are clamping down on what you can say and what you can't say, and putting things, because it's harmful discussions to have, and policing all these things. I think it's got worse with this than any other thing by an order of magnitude. That's too much. Not an order of magnitude, but by it's a couple of times worse, I would say. And these are all people that are heavily invested. I'm going to give you three names that are heavily invested in this. And all three of them, this is the point, all three of them are on the anti-woke side. So let me just show you a tweet from Colin Wright. Okay, he's heavily invested on the gender critical side, I think is the term that's typically used there. He's heavily invested on that. He's an out and out atheist. So I'm going to play you a couple of clips by two others, Helen Joyce and Posey Parker. These are both recent interviews that they've given. So just let me play you the footage here.
I don't believe in God either. Yeah. I'm not down with intangible kind of lies.
Disavow.
I mean, partly I think it's because it's basically a new religion, and you're not meant to get your head around religions. Specifically, you're not meant to. Any attempt to get around it is showing that you don't have faith. So to me, it's very like, I was brought up Catholic, although I no longer really believe. And
I feel your pain.
Yeah, okay. So, but three gods in one. Like, do you remember the mystery of the Trinity?
Yes, of course.
Right.
Father,
So
Son,
you're
Spirit.
not meant to try to understand that. And you're certainly not meant to say, okay, three gods equals one. Therefore, in any equation in all of mathematics, 3 equals 1.
Yeah.
It's ineffable. It's a mystery. And so there's an aspect of that about it, that you're not meant to try to explain it. You're just meant to recite the creed.
So like I say, small clips, and I don't play them as a sort of endorsement. But what's interesting is all three of these then are irreligious people, but they haven't just adopted this wokeism thing. So what I want to say is that there's no inevitability here. If you're not religious, you can still sort of have any sort of view. You can go all the way to them, and I don't need to play you any clips in the other direction, because the numbers are, it's well out there. And why are they well out there? Because we know which side the religious side's going to go on, because they have pre-commitments, because God says. So it's kind of skews that side. So that's the side that I wanted to evidence more there. What is also interesting with that Helen Joyce clip is that she accuses the side she's up against of religious thinking. So even within that, there are people who are not religious who are accusing other people who are not religious of sort of following on with religious thinking. But there is certainly no inevitability, is the point that I'm making, that somehow we're just losing. There's this big concern here that, well, things aren't going to get any better because as religion in society declines, it's just going to be replaced. I just think that's bunk. I think that's nonsense. I think a religious mindset comes from two places. One, it comes from a religious upbringing and then maintaining that. I gave you some examples of people who would come into that. And some people are just naturally religious in their thinking, or what I mean is some of the things, they are particularly amenable. We're all amenable to some extent. We all want that tribal group thing. That's why we go to sporting occasions and all kinds of things like this, or we have a team that we support. It's all aspects of organised religion that you can find outside of organised religion that still appeal to us. That's why organised religion incorporated a lot of these things. We all have some susceptibility, but some people seem to be very susceptible to it. And for those people, yes, if you take away organised religion, I do think they're just going to substitute something else. I agree with you on that. But I think that's a smaller percentage of the population. 10% of the population, maybe 15%. If you take away all religion from society, you're not just going to replace it with this. You will always get plenty of people who don't feel like that, and plenty of people who will actively push back against that and say, no, that's really not what we want. We haven't got rid of these things to just stifle discussion with a new set of unquestionable beliefs. A new set of things that we're going to regard, as Helen Joyce actually said, as original sin, right? That's the kind of position we have with race, isn't it? Sometimes is that some people, it's almost they've got a sort of original sin that they can't get rid of anymore. And all you can do is apologise for it and try and do some kind of penance to make up for it. People are going to always have those kinds of ideas. They are attractive ideas for some people, but I think they are always going to be firmly in the minority. So that's where I think. So I just wanted to talk about the term wokeism and using the term wokeism. I did say I do that. Let's do that. So, it's not a term that I've used before. It's not particularly a term that I like because it's kind of a difficult term sometimes to describe. But I think we have problems with these terms. It's like if I don't use that term, what do I use? And what terms aren't sullied by overuse? There aren't any. This is a problem that we create for ourselves. I recall back sort of 2012, 13, 14, there was a term then, of course, SJW, Social Justice Warrior. And at first it had some traction. It didn't just refer to somebody who was a proponent of social justice to any degree. Lots of people are. I am. But it was somebody that had this sort of warriorist mentality, online warriorist mentality, that meant that effectively they do more harm than good. They don't want to discuss and debate these things, right? It's a kind of purity spiral on the one hand, and there's this sense that what they're doing alienates those that they disagree with more than tries to engage and convert them. They're not interested in that. They're interested in the them and us. They're interested actually in making things worse, or at least that's what they end up doing, even if that's not what they're trying to achieve. I think that's what they try and achieve. But inevitably, just the same as right-wingers overuse the term Marxist, just the same as left-wingers overuse the term Nazi, SJW started to become, somebody disagrees with you and they're slightly towards that, whether they're an SJW. It just become, the term became like you didn't want to use it because you felt it's a bit of a cringe to use it in the end. And I think it's the same with this. But what else do you use? It's difficult to know what to say sometimes. And it's a shame because sometimes a term comes along that's really useful. I recall a few years back when I first heard the term gaslighting. I thought, that is a wonderful term. And what the term was supposed to apply to, forgive me if my definition isn't perfect. It's somebody who psychologically, it's somebody with a personal relationship, a close personal relationship with somebody. It could be a brother and sister, parent and child, could be a marriage or a relationship, a sexual relationship. And one of the people, the abuser, is psychologically or could be physically abusing the other person. But then on top of that initial abuse, there's then a second level of psychological abuse, because what they do is they try and undermine the belief in the abused person's mind that it's even happened. What are you talking about? These things never happened. You must be imagining it, or you're misunderstanding, you're misremembering it. So there's a sort of second level. And it's a deliberate thing. It's not just a disagreement as to what happened. It's a deliberate attempt to try and undermine that person's beliefs, maybe just to get away with what you're doing, but also to try and, again, psychologically undermine them. So they're questioning their own sanity now. Not only have I been abused, or I think I have, but maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe these things never happened. Maybe I'm going a bit mad. That's what it was supposed to be. It comes from a film from the 1940s called Gaslight, hence the term. Great term to describe something very specific that happens in terms of abuse, where the abuser then abuses again by undermining what somebody says. That happens in close relationships. Now it doesn't mean that. Now all it means is if you say something, if you say, well, I was really offended by something, and I say, well, I don't think you were. That's gaslighting now, right? I don't even have to be the person who did the original thing. It could be I saw something on the television and it offended me. If I say to you, well, actually, I don't believe you, right? That's gaslighting. It's all it means now is questioning somebody, questioning something that somebody says. Not just taking them at face value is gaslighting. That's not what it means. It's not even close. And all that's done, people have used it, they've weaponized that term because it sounded something terrible. It is something terrible. It's something really very sinister. And so it has some gravitas, doesn't it? It's a term that has some resonance with us. And so for a brief period of time, it's a wonderful insult to throw at people, to accuse them of this terrible thing. And now it means nothing. Now it's just, all you've done ultimately is just trashed that term. You've removed it from the vocabulary as a useful term. And this is the problem with all these terms. And so I end up with a video like this. I call it, Is Wokeism a Religion? Because that's the term that people use. So I think that's the best thing to go with. But what terms are available? There are no good terms, and there can be no good terms, because as soon as we come up with a good term, people will just use it as just a little smeary insult. And within a short period of time, within a few months, it becomes a little bit embarrassing to use, because you become associated using it with the people that misuse, that over-apply it, that apply it to everything. Okay, I did say it would be a ramble. I hope you've enjoyed the video nonetheless. Interested to know what you think in response. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.